Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are jumping into the real fundamentals, the machinery behind the global economy.
Yeah, the core stuff.
And we're not just listing terms here. The mission is really to get the rhythms, the policy tools, and those, early warning signs so you can actually understand why things happen in the markets.
Absolutely. Think of the sources we pulled as like a structured guide. It shows how economic cycles work, how policy tries to steer them.
Right.
And the real key, I think, is connecting the dots. Seeing how, say, an inverted yield curve isn't just a weird graph, it actually connects to why a central bank might act months down the line.
Because otherwise it just sounds like noise.
Right.
But once you see the framework, it starts to feel a bit more predictable. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the big one, the thing that just happens, the business cycle.
Yeah, the economy definitely doesn't move in a straight line.
Yeah.
Up and down. That's the business cycle, just that natural rise and fall in activity. And it's actually the NDER, the National Bureau of Economic Research, that officially calls the timing on these phases. And you got to know the order. Expansion, peak, contraction, and trough.
Okay, let's start with the good part. Expansion or recovery. That's when, well, things feel good, right? Activity's picking up everywhere, GDP's going up, people feel more confident, they start spending again.
And banks are lending more easily. Risk appetite is higher.
Yeah, and you see it in big purchases like new cars, appliances, that kind of stuff. Sales are strong.
Right. And that expansion keeps going until the economy basically hits a wall, its capacity limit.
Yeah.
That's the peak,
The very top.
the top of the cycle. Businesses are running flat out. They can't really squeeze much more out of their workers or machines. It's usually a pretty short moment, but it signals, okay, growth is about to turn into a slowdown.
And that slowdown is the contraction phase. One source mentioned contractions often come after that weird inverted yield curve signal we'll talk about later.
Yeah, that's a key predictor.
But during the contraction itself, you really feel the fear set in. GDP goes down, consumer confidence tanks.
And unemployment starts creeping up. Companies let go of temporary workers first, then hiring freezes.
Yeah, and you see stress on personal finances too, right? Like credit card debt rises, people start missing loan payments more often. It gets tough.
Exactly. And that slide continues down until you hit the bottom, the trough. That's the lowest point before things start turning around again, heading back towards expansion.
Okay, so definitions are important here. The media throws around recession all the time. What's the actual definition?
Well, the technical sort of textbook definition is at least 2 quarters in a row where GDP shrinks.
But the NBER, the official scorekeepers, they look at more than just GDP, don't they?
Precisely. They consider the depth of the downturn, how widespread it is across the economy, and how long it lasts. They look at jobs, production, income, not just that single GDP number.
Which is why they often announce a recession started months after it actually did.
Exactly. And if that downturn is really bad and lasts a long time, we're talking at least 6 quarters, a year and a half of falling GDP, then it crosses into being called a depression. It's about severity and duration.
Got it. So that's the overall economic climate, the 4 seasons. Now let's talk about how different types of businesses, different industries handle these seasons, because not everyone reacts the same way when a storm hits.
Right. This is where we connect the big picture cycle to, well, your investments, potentially. We generally group industries into 4 buckets based on how sensitive they are: growth, defensive, cyclical, and countercyclical.
Okay, growth first. These are the exciting ones, yeah. High risk, potentially high reward. Tech startups, biotech.
Often, yeah. They tend to be focused on innovation. They usually pay little or no dividends because all the cash goes back into growing the business.
And their stock prices can be all over the place.
Totally volatile. It's all based on hopes for future earnings, not what they're making right now.
Okay, then cyclicals. These sound like they follow the cycle pretty closely.
They're super sensitive to the business cycle, almost like an amplifier. They boom during an expansion because people feel wealthy and buy their products.
But they get crushed in a contraction.
Absolutely crushed. Think about industries like steel, heavy equipment manufacturing, the auto industry. If the economy looks shaky, you can probably put off buying that new pickup truck for another year.
Right, and that revenue just dries up for them.
Instantly.
Yeah.
So if cyclicals amplify the ups and downs, where do people go for stability when things look rough?
That must be the defensive industries.
Exactly. They tend to resist the cycles because, well, people need their products no matter what.
Like what? Food, utilities.
Yeah, things like alcohol, tobacco, pharmaceuticals, basic food staples, public utilities. You still need electricity and water. You still need essential medicines, even if you lose your job. Their sales stay relatively stable.
Okay, makes sense. And the last one, countercyclical. That sounds like the opposite of cyclical.
It literally is. These investments actually do better when the economy is contracting, and they might underperform during an expansion.
Huh. Like what?
The classic example is gold and related mining stocks. When investors get scared and flee risky assets, they often pile into gold as a safe haven, pushing its price up.
So they zig when the economy zags.
Pretty much. Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the reason these cycles don't just spiral completely out of control, usually, is because there are powerful forces trying to manage them.
Ah, the government and the central bank stepping in.
Right. Fiscal policy and monetary policy. Deliberate actions to try and smooth out the ride.
And it's crucial to know who does what.
That's job one. Fiscal policy, that's the politicians, Congress, and the president. They manage the cycle using taxes and government spending. Think stimulus checks, infrastructure bills, tax cuts. That's fiscal.
Got it. Budget stuff.
Budget stuff. And monetary policy, that's the Federal Reserve, the Fed. They're independent, unelected. Their main goal is stabilizing the economy, mostly by managing money supply and credit conditions.
Okay, the Fed. They have tools. What are they?
They have three main ones, but honestly, one is far and away the most important today. Open market operations. OMO.
OMO. What's that involve?
It's just the Fed buying and selling U.S. government securities, treasury bonds, bills, notes on the open market. That's their go-to tool for daily adjustments.
Okay, so let's walk through that. If the economy is weak, maybe in a contraction, what do?
They use expansionary policy. You might hear the term quantitative easing, or QE. They buy those government securities from banks.
And buying injects cash into the system.
Exactly. It pumps money into the banking system. Banks then have more reserves, which hopefully encourages them to lend more, stimulating spending and investment.
Makes sense. So the flip side, if inflation is getting too hot, like maybe near the peak?
Then they do the opposite. Contractionary policy, also called quantitative tightening, or QT. They sell government securities.
Selling pulls cash out.
Pulls cash out of the banking system, precisely.
Right.
It reduces the money supply, makes borrowing a bit more expensive, and hopefully cools down that inflation, like gently tapping the brakes.
Okay, FOMO is the big one. What are the other two tools?
Second is the reserve requirement, the RR. That's the slice of deposits banks have to keep on hand in reserve and can't lend out.
So changing that changes how much banks can lend.
Historically, yes. Lowering the requirement was loose policy, let banks lend more. Raising it was tight, restricting lending. But honestly, since the 2008 financial crisis, the Fed doesn't really tweak this much for day-to-day management. FOMO is way more flexible. RR is more structural now.
Gotcha. And number three, the one everyone talks about, interest rates.
Right. Though the Fed doesn't directly set all rates, they set a target for a really important one. The federal funds rate, the FFR.
That's the rate banks charge each other for overnight loans, right, to meet those reserve requirements.
Exactly. And that FFR target is probably the most watched indicator of the Fed's stance. It ripples through the whole financial system.
So when the Fed raises rates, they're raising the FFR target.
Correct. Raising the target is contractionary, makes borrowing more expensive, fights inflation. Lowering the target is expansionary, encourages borrowing and economic activity.
And the other rates we hear about, like the discount rate or the prime rate.
They generally just follow the FFR's lead. The discount rate is what the Fed charges banks directly for short-term loans. The prime rate is what commercial banks charge their best corporate customers. They both adjust based on where the Fed guides the FFR. The FFR really is the key benchmark.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because deciding when and how to use these tools isn't just technical, right? It depends heavily on which economic philosophy you follow.
Absolutely. Policy choices aren't made in a vacuum. There are competing ideas about how the economy actually works best. We can quickly touch on the four main schools of thought. Think of it as the background debate behind the headlines.
Okay, lay them out.
Well, first you have the Keynesians, named after John Maynard Keynes. They basically argue that government has to step in forcefully during recessions, primarily through more government spending and cutting taxes, fiscal policy to boost overall demand. They don't think the private sector can recover fast enough on its own.
Okay, active government. Who's on the other side?
You've got the classical economists and the related supply-siders. Classical folks generally believe in laissez-faire, leave the economy alone. Free markets are efficient, less regulation is better.
And supply-siders.
They're a modern take on that, really focusing on the supply side. They argue that cutting taxes, especially on businesses and investment, and slashing regulations is the best way to stimulate growth, make it easier to produce things.
So Keynesians focus on demand, supply-siders on supply. Interesting. What's the fourth?
The monetarists, Milton